Today, we're talking me. So some of you guys are going to just turn this off right now, and you know what? All power to you, good on you, and knowing a little bit about me, you get to understand a little bit about where my opinions and my feeling about art and comics come from. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to do a little adventure here. We're going to go up to Ojai, do a little hike, talk some comics. So I'm here. I'm in Ojai, California, which is about 15 minutes away from my apartment. And we're going to go on a little hike. Let's do it. Go check this out. Now, despite the fact that no one might watch this because you'd rather watch Bill Sienkiewicz or Frank Miller or some of the great comic artists and creators, me talk about them, which I completely understand. I'm deciding to do this because, you know what? It's my channel. Check this out. This is kind of cool. It's kind of a nice little opening here. You see. So, today, let's just talk a little bit about me, what's going on. I was born in El Centro, California, which is on the border of Mexico and California, right a sister city to Mexicali, which is the Mexican side, and on the American side, El Centro, Calexico. I was born there. Mom met my father dancing at a club in Mexicali. My mom's white, English, Swedish, Irish. My father from Mexico, from Sinaloa, the city of Culiacan. And they met. My father was living with his aunt in Mexicali on the border town. My mother was living next to her grandmother in Brawley, down on the border. And she was a school teacher. And on the weekends, her and her girlfriends would go to the clubs in Mexicali. And she met this young guy. He's, I think, 4 or 5 years her junior. And they hit it off. She spoke some Spanish. He spoke no English. But they hit it off. The romance bloomed and they got married. About a year or 2 years later, I came along. And then a couple years after that, my sister. They got divorced when I was 5. I didn't last long. We won't go into all those details. But they got divorced. So then I was suddenly now a kid without a dad, and my mom said, screw this, we're moving to Arkansas. She wanted to get out of Dodge. She wanted to trailblaze, be a pioneer of her own. So that's what she did. She took off. And as far as my time in El Centro, those first 5 years, I don't have too many memories. I remember, of course, the things like, playing in the backyard, and we had a plum tree, and, playing in the grass with the water hose, and we had some dogs, and I remember earthquakes. Actually, as a little kid, I remember a couple earthquakes that freaked everybody out. But that was it. If you see pictures of me, you'll see I loved Batman. There was this record that I had, this little like spooky record. It was like Batman versus Man-Bat, and it was a little 45 that came with a little book that you would read along with it. You can actually find this on YouTube, the recording of it. It's really freaky. And we'd play that. So Batman was big because, the Adam West show was huge. Adam West show was like massive. So I was into Batman. I was into Spider-Man because Spider-Man cartoon was big. So I was into those comics and stuff. One of my first memories actually was Star Wars. So Star Wars came out. I was born in 73. So I think Star Wars came out in 76 or 77, something like that. So even though I was pretty tiny, I remember seeing Star Wars. I called it Tar Wars. I remember seeing Tar Wars. And but besides that, there's another memory I have of my parents going to a Halloween costume, and my father dressed up as Kiss. He was I think he was either Star or Cat. I'm not sure which one. And my mom dressed up as maybe Demon or something. I don't know, but it freaked me out. I remember that. And I remember my mom getting a perm. And when she came home from getting a perm, I cried and I freaked out because she didn't look like my mom, you know? So that was the memories of that town. And I've been, of course, since after the divorce, I would go back and visit that area with my father. My father never moved. He stayed there. He became a citizen and stayed there in the area working for the irrigation department of Imperial Valley. And he became quite successful doing that. Not educated, just working his ass off and doing that. So some of my stories and my ideas, like the one about Calexico, there's actually a story that I wrote about these cousins who live across the border from each other, and they get kind of tailed into stuff. But yeah, so I'm using some of those memories and things I know about these little border towns.
Audio Jungle.
We're here in Rice Canyon, a little trail here in Ojai. Chapter 2, Arkansas years. So my mom moved out to Arkansas. I guess there was some trucker or somebody she met that she liked, and she moved from California to Arkansas. She has no family there, no connections really, just moved her and her 2 little kids out there. So being a single parent mom in the 80s in Arkansas in a trailer park, that was a very specific, unique life. And that's really the basis for that graphic novel I keep talking about I'm working on, Shangri-La Estates. So that is, by the way, comment if you have a better name than Shangri-La Estates. Maybe just Shangri-La, I'm not sure. Basically, it's very autobiographical in some ways. It's not like, the book I'm working on, I'm on page about 70, it's probably about 300 pages. It's not like Blankets or Fun Home, where it's like literally autobiographical, my story. There's some big swaths, some big moments that are direct, memories. But then there's a lot of made up stuff, and fictionalized stuff. So I'm calling it semi-autobiographical. But that's my cathartic way to kind of deal with the 6 years living in Arkansas. For the time I was 6 to 12, I lived there. We had a trailer. First we lived in a trailer park, and then my mom bought an acre. And that's why I went to Arkansas in February this year. If you guys saw that video, go check out the video where I went on a cross-country trip. And I went to Arkansas, and it was to do research for this book. It was to just kind of like go back to some of those old places, those old haunts. Arkansas was a magical time. I mean, this was like a place where, as a little boy, growing up in the woods with nature and having the freedom to do whatever you wanted to do, basically, was great. I had to do all these things to make up for my father, not having a father, and that was so hard, and still is a challenge thinking about not having him around. So because we were so far away and I just had my mom, you go out in the woods, you learn how to hunt squirrel, you do outdoor things, you learn about football. It's where I first got my comic book. Mom, I don't remember, it was just at like some kind of AM/PM, gas station. She got a G.I. Joe, I think it was like G.I. Joe number 6 or number 8. And she got this comic and she gave it to me, and that kind of began my love for comics. Now again, I told you before, I dressed up as Spider-Man and Batman, and of course those characters were everywhere in pop culture, and as a kid you were marketed towards Star Wars and G.I. Joe in the 80s when that came out, and those like superheroes. But it was Arkansas when I started reading and really enjoying that. And the other thing that was big in Arkansas for me was role-playing games. My mom loved fantasy. She had The Hobbit. When she was an elementary school teacher, she taught The Hobbit. She read her 4th grade The Hobbit. So she was really into Tolkien and fantasy and sci-fi and stuff. And so that's where my love for that came, is from her, like, directly. And she bought at Walmart, because that's where Walmart is Arkansas, the birthplace. She bought freaking Dungeons and Dragons, the red box, the basic set. Now, when she opened it up and she tried to read it, she just tapped out. She never really played it with me ever. But she gave it to me, and I loved it. I just fell in love with this whole idea of making a world and being creative and telling stories and making a character. That was it for me. That was the end all be all. So role-playing games, and then comics, because I met a friend of mine who had Secret Wars, Marvel Secret Wars. Yeah, now, so I didn't know anything but DC. So Crisis, I didn't know none of that stuff. All I knew was Marvel. So Secret Wars was huge. There's my love of Dr. Doom. Dr. Doom comes from Secret Wars number 10. That's the issue that got me to love him. So I got Secret Wars. And if I remember, they were in packs of 3. They were in these little, like, packs. You bought them in cellophane wrapped packs. And so I had issues 4, 5, 6, but I didn't have 1, 2, and 3. And my friend had 1, 2, and 3. And we tried to, like, trade or borrow. And there were still parts of the store I never really figured out because I didn't get all of them. But that really got me to love the heroes, the superheroes. And when I played D&D, I found out about another role-playing game called Marvel Superheroes. So there you go, Marvel Superheroes. So now you've got, I'm in Arkansas. I'm playing Dungeons and Dragons, Marvel Superheroes, reading comics. That world is kind of shaping out. Now in the 80s, you also had Michael Jackson was huge in my life, and rap and breakdancing. So when rap came on board, when breakdancing was coming on board, this is like now towards the late 80s, probably my last year of Arkansas. That was huge, because those were the cultural touchstones for me to kind of like see what that's about. And Arkansas was funny because we lived, in a trailer park at first, and then we kind of lived out in the boonies outside of Little Rock. And my only exposure to anyone other than white was TV. Like, the only exposure I had to black person was B.A. Baracus from the A-Team. That was it. So I didn't get exposed. I never met a Mexican kid. I was half Mexican. My name was Mexican, but I went by Andy. So no one really thought of me as that Mexican. I didn't really know my culture at all. And that's just the way that was. I mean, so I think you do kind of miss out on some of that. But there's some gains too, though. You do gain, not that specifically, but just living in Arkansas, there's the nature and the outdoors, and there's just so much you can do as a little kid. Just go out and play out in the woods. There's something magical about that. I mean, that's probably why I love coming out here and hiking. It's like you get that chance to just enjoy nature, and I dig that a lot. So the Arkansas years were formative. That's what's basing the graphic novel I'm working on now, called Shangri-La Estates. Missed my daddy. A lot of daddy issues. Mom never remarried. Went through a series of boyfriends. Nothing ever stuck. And it was just 3 of us. Me and my little sister too. So that was Arkansas. And then one day, my mom said, "You know what? I've been here 6 years. I can't hang. I gotta get out." So she's like, "Let's go back home." Now for her, home was not El Centro. home was Fresno, California. That's where she was from. That's where she grew up with her mom and dad and brother and sister. So we sold the trailer, we moved our butts to Fresno, and that's chapter 3 of the saga of that.
Audio Jungle.
Chapter 3, Fresno. So I moved to Fresno, not knowing anybody. Again, not knowing anybody. My mom knew people. I mean, she knew her mom and her brother, and all her family were there. And I actually did get to meet my cousins and my grandparents, who I adored. And we actually lived in a little house, not but like a block away from the grandparents. So the grandparents and us lived a block away. My grandpa owned two homes right there. So I went to middle school and high school in Fresno. I was there for about 6 years. And it's kind of hard to know where you grow up, right? Do you grow up when you're in elementary as a little kid, or do you grow up when you're in like high school? So whatever. I guess I grew up in Fresno in some ways. What's the deal with Fresno? It's hot. It's miserable. I made some friends. I joined a band, so I was a band geek. Marching band in middle school and then in high school. Again, continuing with the comics. Now more comics. Still need a mom to take me though. And in the gaming, finding someone to play D&D with and to play Marvel superheroes and, you know, read comic books. And it was this whole idea of telling stories, right? It's like, I want to tell stories. It wasn't never talked about as a career. There was never thoughts of like, oh, I want to be this. It was more like, I enjoy telling stories and being in these fantasy worlds, right? So that's kind of where that led. I went to high school at a arts high school. So what that means really is it's just a school that has a bunch of snotty kids who think they know better. I went to a high school, Roosevelt, with a bunch of theater nerds and band geeks and stuff like that. And there was it was a magnet school. So you had 2 parts. You had the performance part and then the normal people, right? So to join the performance, you had to, audition basically, actor, singer, dancer, whatever. I auditioned with visual, so I created a portfolio because there was actually like an art group too. It was small, so I joined the art group. See, that just changed angles. See how easy that was? I joined the art group, and that was pretty fun. Took some art classes, enjoyed that a lot. What else was big? I was doing scouting. Really enjoyed the time being outside again, being a scout leader, that kind of stuff. I mean, it all comes down to my dad. It always comes down to your father, as a boy at least. I still didn't have my dad. I saw him only in the summers, and it was hard and hard to see him because it was no fun. We were always in Mexico in the summer. They always spoke Spanish. I never spoke Spanish, so I didn't know what the hell was going on. He would disappear. He'd be off. And it was hard. But I missed having a dad, and I didn't have a dad. Didn't have someone to teach me so many things. My mom was she went back to school to get her master's degree in social work. She became a social worker. So she's like on this path to be a career, And here are these little kids, and there's just 3 little kids here trying to make this work. My grandparents, who kind of like came in as like substitute parents, while my mom's so busy, and she went through a couple more boyfriends, but nothing really solidified. And it was still a tough time. I was never athletic. I really wish I would have done sports. That's like one major regret. I didn't do sports. I kick myself all the time for never doing sports. So I didn't do sports. I wasn't athletic. I was in my fantasy world of D&D or comics, or now we're at the end of the 80s, the Commodore 128. So now we've got Bard's Tale, we've got Wizardry, we've got Ultima 4, Ultima 3, all these games that are now taking that time away and taking that fantasy world to the next level, right? And immersing yourself and escaping all the problems. That's the problem. That's what you do. And I think during that time, too, I started really getting intrigued with science. Now that I'm older, I understand what the love of science was. The love of science is just the love of learning, really. It's about learning things. And I just love, and I still, one of my big passions, my strengths, is my love of learning. And I took a lot of science courses in high school, and that was because I wanted to really learn a lot, and I thought that would be a career because I felt that would be safer than being a director or a film or a writer or an artist. I wanted to be an artist, but I was afraid of it because all my family had some artism in them. Like my grandparents, who were both artists, my mom was very creative, but it was always discouraged. You don't want to be a struggling artist. You don't want to be poor as an artist. Do something secure. So do science. And that concept was instilled in me so strongly that I wussed out on the art. And while I took art classes, even in college, even in junior college, I took some art classes, but I didn't like say, you know what, I'm going all in, all the chips go on art, right? Or go in film, or go into the things that I'm passionate about. It was, I'll put a couple here, I'll hedge my bets, and I'll put a bunch here, and stuff like that. And that did me in. Because that made it to where you can't be great, you can't be really good until you put the time in. Okay, so where are we here? We're at Willis Canyon. There's my feet. There's my bag. It's my Eno hammock. Chapter 4. So we left off with Fresno, and one of the things I did after high school was I got a job, learned how to drive stick, my mom's Escort, 1984 Escort, and I worked as a pizza boy for Pizza Hut. Did that until I was robbed by gunpoint for 2 damn extra large Super Supremes and $20 of cash, and then I became the dough master, worked inside and making the pizzas. So I was a driver until I got robbed, and I said, forget that, and I stopped that business. After that, man, there's a lot of bugs. I also worked part-time at a comic shop. Again, we're building on that comic book love. I'm not wanting to be a creator at this time. I'm still saying I'm going to be, I'm going to go into science, but I worked at a comic shop, still around, I think, Neil's Cards and Comics on Olive and Chestnut, something like that, Fresno. And I worked there just on Saturdays, maybe a couple other days in the week, mostly just for like comics. But I also I think I got paid a little bit. That was interesting. I was actually working those weekends that Spawn #1 came out, Youngblood #1 came out, all that, that big hype when Image was coming out. I was there in the shop, so I saw the big lines, I saw the big numbers, I saw all that, and that was pretty crazy. But it's there when I had access to so much comics, I really got into the art too, and I got into Heavy Metal Magazine and the Euro stuff and foreign things, and that's when I really kind of expanded my vocabulary of comics and of the medium, right? And as I learned and grew and read Sandman for the first time and all these indies and stuff, I kind of understood that there's some storytelling potentials there that at that time you couldn't do anywhere else. Now it's arguably, with computers and technology, you could tell almost any story in a film format, but back then, for sure, comics is where it was at as far as like being completely open canvas to whatever types of story you want to tell. So here I was out of high school, figuring out college, and getting into comics. And I decided to go to South America for 2 years. Probably the best decision I've ever made, to learn another culture. I learned the language. I can read it. I can speak it. You know, to learn a people. I lived in Venezuela for 2 years. To learn to appreciate what you have here as an American, if you're an American, or even just in a kind of more industrialized world. Go live in a third world country. And I know third world is not a term we use anymore, but go into a more, I don't know how else to describe it, but just the level of poverty, of chaos, of the insurrection, of uncertainty, the people there with joyous spirits, with music filled of life and love. Best experience of my life, of all time. I still dream about going back. I dream about Venezuela still. And it's been over 20 years, 25 years or so since I've been. I loved it there. It had nothing to do with comics. But again, it was a way to me to think about, I want to help these people. I want to be a scientist. I want to do that kind of stuff. When I came back, my mother had moved to Pismo Beach, California, which is about 3 hours west on the beach from Fresno. And she moved there. Again, I'm coming now from South America back home. Lived with her for a couple years, tried to go to college. And the deal was, okay, now it's time to go to college and get your degree. Let's be a scientist. So I went to community college, met a wonderful little lady named Alana, married her, had 2 daughters, Isabella and Natalia, and going to UCSB, Santa Barbara, University of California of Santa Barbara, over there, just a little south of Pismo. And, what could be better, right? Here's the problem. While I'm studying science, I'm studying molecular biology, organic chemistry, all these high-powered science stuff. What am I doing? I'm doing comics. I'm spending my free time on comics. I'm making my own comics. I'm going to the comic shop every Wednesday. I'm a Wednesday warrior. I'm getting my books. I'm in a drama class. I wrote some plays. I did some short films. I did all these things that were creative, that were storytelling, but it wasn't the science. I mean, that's where I was spending my passion. That was what I was loving to do, is making comics. I remember Powers 1 just came out. Kabuki just came out. All these indie books that were the ABC books, top 10 books. All that stuff was just coming out. And it was like, dude, this was so inspiring to me. Kabuki, David Mack especially, David Mack and Brian Michael Bendis, those guys totally inspired me to do comics. I even made my own Ash Can comic. I made some. I tried to sell it to the comic shop, I went to Kinko's and Xeroxed it. It's like that kind of, maybe I should do a video on that. That is what really inspired me, but I didn't pursue it full time. I didn't, I was still going to do the science, get a real job. I have this family now, and I got to take care of them, and that's what we're going to do. I was married with kids, graduated college. Degree in molecular and cellular and developmental biology. And I could get a job. I could make money. I could be an adult. And I got a job in Malibu working as a research associate 2. I moved up the ranks to research associate 4, which is as far as you can go without getting a PhD. And I worked in Malibu, and we found a little apartment in Canoga Park in the Valley. It's called the Valley. It's part of Los Angeles. It's hot, kind of miserable. A lot of great restaurants, a lot of great culture, a lot of different people, which I liked. I liked that because in Fresno, we lived in a kind of some, not the best neighborhood, a little more urban, multicultural. This is where I got to meet. In Arkansas is when I talked about I never experienced like black people and Mexican people. Moved to Fresno, which is like predominantly when the areas I was in was black and Mexican. And so I got a really chance to meet people. And at first it was scary, but I enjoyed making friends over Robotech, Robotech and role-playing games with some black friends and stuff. That was a lot of cool. So back to LA. So I'm in LA and I'm there and I'm living the dream. And of course, what am I doing in my free time? I'm making comics. I'm still reading comics. And I start getting more into film because the thing that really was revelatory in college was that experience writing those short plays and producing them. And it was acting on stage. It was writing stories and seeing them. And that was so fulfilling. I said, I got to do some film. I got to go to the next level now. I'm in LA. I'm in Hollywood, baby. Let's do it. Let's see what that's about. So I did that. I went online, found some small short films, and I was, there for, being a PA and helping out, being second AC and grip and whatever else needed to be done. And that was a freaking blast. I loved that. And then, of course, I started to write a couple things. I'm like, let's see if we can produce it, blah, blah, blah. And then all hell broke loose.
Audio Jungle.
There are a couple things I would not wish upon my worst enemy. One of those would be divorce. After 5 years, me and my wife, Alana, got divorced, went through that process, and we don't have enough time in this video. I don't have enough memory on my card or batteries in my camera to go through all that and what that was all about. But you comment below. You want me to do a video just on divorce? We'll do it. We might call it the art of something else. But yeah. So suffice it to say that we dissolved the relationship, which to me is the most tragic element of my life, because now I had 2 little kids who were without their daddy. You see the cycle? You see how the cycle's going? So now my 5-year-old daughter, just like me as a 5-year-old boy, doesn't have the dad around all the time. And while they were up north about 2 hours away, and I could go up and drive up there every other weekend to see them, that is not enough to be there and be the support these little kids need. So that tore me up, still tears me up, even now that they're old and grown up. I know it affects them just like it affected me. So there was a rebuilding phase, we'll say, that I had to go through, and that was me figuring out, what am I going to do? Now, I still have my job. I still had child support. I still had bills. I couldn't just go off the reservation. But I could use this to kind of like understand about myself and things that really made me happy. So I moved to Ventura, California from LA because there was no reason for me to be in LA anymore. My job was in Malibu, so I didn't have to, I could go up north a little bit and still commute down south. And I moved to Ventura in a little studio, and I saw my kids on the weekends, and I became a divorced dad and tried to figure out that new position, status. Not an easy one, let me tell you. So I kept with the comics, of course. And now at this point, I'm studying Frazetta. I'm kind of getting into more illustration. And I'm also saying, you know what, this is my moment, because I was connected to these film students. I said, you know, this is my moment to do something creative. I said, this is my chance to do something different. Remember how in LA I loved being on the film crew and being on set, and you know, I was an extra for Spider-Man, and you know, all those kind of fun things, right? What if I made a movie? What if I made a film? So I made a 40 minute, which is still considered short, but it's a pretty long ass short, 40-minute film called After Sherry. And you can find it, it's on Vimeo. Just type After Sherry, you'll find it, or I'll put a link maybe. Made the film. I have a bit part in it. Didn't really want to do it, but that's just the way that turned out. So I loved it though. I mean, this was going back to the theater, going back to these moments of writing creative, and it's that realization of your thing. And that was so freaking fun and such a moment. And we made the press kit, and we printed DVDs, and we did all this stuff. And due to some things, it was my fault. I dropped the ball in not getting into the festival circuit. And it was my fault that we didn't push it farther to really propel that career. And again, it became an issue of not feeling supported or not feeling that I could do it. It was one of those regrets where it was like, we made this product, but we didn't take it to the next step, which is get it into festivals, use it as a reel, get the next gigs, get the next jobs, that kind of thing. I had 2 opportunities after that film. One by a crew member, one by a producer who said, hey, I want you to direct a short film for me. And both of those, I dropped the ball because of A, insecurities, or B, because I felt with my loved ones around me weren't supporting me in that area, and then I felt like, oh, I got to stick with the safe route. Which, just talking about it gets me upset and thinking about that. So that was that. I met my current wife, Nicole, the light of my life. I met her through a mutual friend, acquaintance, her father actually, believe it or not. And we started down that path of romance, introducing her to my kids, that sort of thing. And I was spurred again on some more creativity, and it's like, maybe I should write some more films, and I'm really enjoying that. And I decided to, I made some spec scripts, right? I did some spec scripts. This is when I was getting more into the TV writing too. I wrote a pilot, you know, I wrote a spec of Breaking Bad, which was really popular at the time. I was really getting into the writing element and the screenplay and screencraft. I went to some conventions, screenwriting conventions, all that kind of stuff, trying to figure out a way to like use these storytelling ideas that I learned back when I was a kid playing D&D, all those make-believe fantasy time, use those into, you know, a craft. And still, I got this day job, right, which is doing some kind of a science at some point or another, right? So there was that element to it. And the science kind of switched from, you know, lab science to like more project management work. So I was not even really in the science, I was in the the industry, but I was doing more PM work, which is definitely not as fun or rewarding from my perspective. So this is getting close to where we are today. This is like right almost where we're at. Big old squirrel. So chapter 7. This is a new beginning. So me and Nicole were doing well. I got remarried, stayed in Ventura, and now I have 2 little kids with her. My older 2 kids, Isabella and Helena, they're grown up now. One's off in college, the other one's starting college here pretty soon. And I got 2 little babies. One that's in 2nd grade and one's in preschool. And at some point I got into stand-up comedy. I don't remember how that all happened. But at some point I said, I gotta tell stories, but I can't drum up a crew and write and produce a film. We just didn't have the money. I don't have the finances to do that. And while I was intrigued in figuring out how to do that, get the finances, that whole world is myriad, confusing, and just I couldn't navigate it. So I thought, well, I love performing. Why don't I do some stand-up? So I started doing stand-up. I did some in LA, in Ventura. I even went to Fresno. I did a couple corporate gigs even. So it wasn't all just open mics. I got paid a couple times, which is nice, you know. But that's a grind. And I was doing that at nights. I would work at my day job and I would drive down to LA at 6 p.m. I would go and if I was lucky, do 3, I would say 3 would be lucky, 2 to 3 spots, places. You go to an open mic, you do this open mic. It was open mic mostly, but then a couple spots where you might get a little something or whatever. And I would do that. But I would do that maybe, if I did that 3 times a week, that would be great. That's still a lot of work. I'm coming home at midnight, and then I got a day job on top. And it was just a grind, and I was thinking, okay, while I'm doing that, I'm also thinking, you know what, maybe I should make a comic. I'm going to these comic book conventions. I started going. I even went with Alana. She was a Trekkie, so she was into like Star Trek. She was into that stuff. Not the comic book so much, although she did read Sandman, of course. But, you know, she would go to some of those conventions and stuff. So here I am, going to conventions. I'm now married again, got some stability. Again, I got a family to deal with and support, but I got some stability. Maybe I should do a comic. And that's when I was looking for work. I was in between jobs. And my comic shop guy said that Howard Chaykin is in town. And Howard Chaykin lives in Ventura. And I was like, what? I contacted him. I think it was just through Facebook. I just reached out to him. I said, hey, do you need assistance or anything? I like to ink comics and stuff like that, right? Because at that point, I hadn't done anything. I was just inking I was just, you know, doing samples of inks and stuff to try to be an inker. Because that was one thing I was thinking about doing, is maybe I could be an inker. He said he graciously let me in his home, checked me out, saw my stuff, said that I had a decent line, that I was a decent inker, but my drafting sucks, which is like 100% agree. Gold star for him for that, because he just kept it real. One thing Howard does, he keeps it real. So I appreciate that to that level. And so I was his assistant. I was doing some work for him, mostly paste ups, some clean up, spotting blacks, ruling, panels, that kind of stuff. Just basic board stuff, just learning basic draftsmanship stuff that he knew, that he learned when he was a kid, right? And so now I'm learning from one of the greats. I did that for about 6 months, maybe between 4 and 6 months. And the reason why that stopped was I got a job. So I was like, oh, I got a job now. And with the day job, I couldn't do assistant work with him, and he needed someone, who could be there all the time. So that ended. But he opened my eyes to the business, the production element to comics. And I was thinking, maybe I can use that knowledge. Clearly, I have a love for the craft, and maybe I can create my own comic. Just self-publish it, create my own comic. Well, I met this buddy of mine, Paul, and he had done some Kickstarters, and he had done some comics, and he was going to shows, and Matt is a huge freaking squirrel. And he did shows, and he was like, hey, this is what you do. And I learned from him a little bit on actual self-publishing and running a Kickstarter. That started the Kickstarter business. And that was, I did 8. I've done 8 total Kickstarters, which is a hell of a lot. Mostly from the horror Western book, but also I did a game, the werewolf tokens, and I also did some children's books, which I have a 3rd book I need to do big time. I gotta freaking work on that thing. So I did Kickstarters. I loved it. I loved the experience. I loved the community. I actually met fans and friends and had friends. I have legit friends because of it. So that was wonderful. It's also extremely taxing on me emotionally. I just go through a lot of up and downs with the expectations, my own expectations of doing well, and then not making those goals, or making those goals but not exceeding even the other goals, right? And it's like, can this get so high that I have to quit my job? That's always the end goal. So I did that for a while. I did the Kickstarters, and I started going to shows, being a carny, and I did a lot of comic conventions. And I have very mixed feelings about comic conventions. Now, there are too many of them. They were at least a year, 2 years ago, they were just saturated. It was like every other weekend there's one in Southern California. It's too many. It is cutthroat, and the people that go to them really just want mashup pop culture stuff. They're not the quote-unquote readers that people like me who are making stories and books go. I'm talking about the vast majority. The vast majority of people at Comic-Cons are there because they like Doctor Who or Supernatural or, Adventure Time. They're not there to pick up some indie comic book. At the most, they're there to pick up Spider-Man or the signing of a Batman comic. But to pick up a new book from an indie guy, that's a very small niche group of a very niche group as it is. But that's where we are. So we did some did some shows, which, again, I do love interacting with people and bringing my story to new viewers, but it's tough. And now we're here. Now it's YouTube time. Now this is the channel, and this is me. You've heard the gambit. You know the story. This is me. Why am I doing the channel? I already did a video on that. But so now it's like, okay, let's build the audience. Let's keep going. As I'm continuing my draftsman skills, attempting to be better, attempting to not have to collaborate, but wanting to collaborate when I want to, but also being able to do it myself. That's where I'm at. I'm working on my books. I'm having this channel, which is a great outlet for me to talk comics and talk to the stuff that I love and share passion and be creative and have fun with it. So that is, I think, the last chapter. There might be more. I'm having fun with damn toys. It's
Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle.
Yeah, I'm not sure which way to go. So we're just gonna go this way. Okay guys, we did it. Trail's done hiking. Thank you guys all for watching. If you got questions, let me know, I'll answer them. Check out the Patreon, I'm sending out personalized postcards for everybody. Check it out. Thanks guys, bye.